Hello there! Welcome to another installment of Profiles in Tacticalness. So today we will be talking about one of the more fun classes throughout the entire series, the Ninja here. So this is a unit that's always been kind of a hit and run, hit fast, hopefully don't die kind of situation. Well, with one exception, and that would be the PSP remake, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So by and large, they've always been characterized by being a bit of a hybrid attacker, typically going for more melee or ranged, occasionally being a little bit of a caster. It varied by game in terms of how good they were as a caster, but generally speaking, they were there to run into the back lines and kill off some squishies. Interesting note, historically speaking, they're kind of an amalgamation of a bunch of different tropes assigned to ninjas. But funnily enough, when they're actually used in the story, they're pretty much used correctly. Ninja, by and large, weren't typically going around assassinating so much as they were mostly used for scouts. Occasionally they would go and burn a house down, because why would anybody run in with a knife when, they could let fire do the job for them? But anyway, by and large, yeah, they were mostly used as scouts, and throughout the story, you see them used as scouts, so I always appreciated that as a little bit of a historical note. But now, moving on. So, first of all, let's go ahead and take a quick peek at March of the Black Queen here. So, we have the Fox unit over here, the three ninjas here. In both March of the Black Queen and OB64, they were a relatively basic hybrid type of class. They were the first one that you could get that had multiple attacks in, well, I should say three attacks in the front row, as well as a casting ability. So they had a single elemental cast from the back row, and then from the front line, they had three melee attacks, which actually were pretty devastating if used right. For example, if you had three ninjas in your front row, you could essentially get 9 attacks off. If you got them attack boosting items, they could beat just about anything. It was pretty fantastic, actually. Early game, that's probably one of my favorite combinations that I've found in the game so far. Once they got to a certain point, they were able to be upgraded to Master Ninjas. This was pretty much just a flat upgrade. In the case of OB64, this gave them a nice little crown. But again, they were the first ones that you could get that would actually give you 3 attacks in the front row. As you saw there, it wasn't enough for them to completely beat a golem in melee, but it still was relatively impressive for the fact that they are about 4 levels under that guy anyway. So now, once we get to the Lucht, well, the original Lucht, we run into a little bit of a different story. So their casting abilities were still retained, their melee abilities were still retained, but their movement range was their big selling point. They had surprisingly high resistance, all things considered, but they had pretty high movement range. They were still, a hybrid attacker. You could have them go around and cast missile spells at people. They specialized in swords, although you really could give them a lot of different weapons depending on what you wanted them to do. By and large, though, it really wasn't one of those ones that stuck out super well. It was just kind of mediocre. Uh, but then this changed a little bit once you got to Knight of Lotus. So, in my opinion, like many of the other classes, Knight of Lotus probably had the best balance overall as far as these guys go. Their whole shtick in that one was just that they had very high evasion. They had really good accuracy and really high evasion. They still had their signature casting ability. They still were only kind of okay at it. But by and large, they finally got a weapon that they specialized, well, that only they specialized in. Actually, no, wait. It was them and the Swordmaster that specialized in katanas. There were only 4 of them in that game, but they were still pretty good. They were, like I said, pretty mediocre casters. They had a special ability that allowed them to throw shurikens. It was a good early game ranged ability, since not everybody could throw a rock, so it was pretty handy. It was, relatively speaking, until they charged up their missile ability, it was nice to have. They could do some pretty okay damage with their sword, but for the most part, they were better off being used as an archer or something like that. They had incredibly high movement range, so if you wanted to use them as just an item spammer, that was pretty reasonable as well. They really had a lot of options, and it was a really fun class to make your leader into, because they could clear half the map in one turn. Due to the system in Knight of Lotus, essentially not being a real-time system as much as a turn-based system, they could move absurdly fast. They had almost double the movement range of almost any other class, and even though they weren't the greatest as far as stat growths go, they weren't the greatest as far as offense goes, they were still a very solid early game class that kind of fell off and got replaced by the Swordmaster later on. So from there on, we get into the PSP remake, and this is probably the most well-known one because they were OP as hell in the remake. So in this one, they they basically got a giant pile of abilities that they didn't really even necessarily need. Um, for example, going down the list here, they got access to a whole bunch of boosting abilities. So they got Fortify and Strengthen all the way up to 4. They absolutely didn't need these. Essentially, it's well, they didn't need to have these, I should say. It's If you're unfamiliar with how it works, if a unit has low defense, they get a lot more benefit out of Fortify. If they have low attack, they get a whole lot more out of Strengthen. They probably should have left this at maybe a 2 or a 3, because essentially what this does, it'll make it to the point where if you give them Fortify 4 and Steel Stance, they're pretty much the same as a Knight at that point. They're pretty much going to almost never take hits. They're going to be functionally immune to a lot of damage types. They're already really fast, they had a really low movement range, and on top of that, most of the weapons that they use, namely daggers, katanas, and bows, they did have access to a few other things as well, like you could transfer over throwing weapons, they could use crossbows. Uh, by and large, well, you could use blowguns on them as well. Personally, I preferred giving them a sort of bow and blowgun setup. Blowgun if somebody gets close and you can put out a status effect. Bow for the sake of going and firing from a little bit farther away. This did limit them since they could only use the kind of cheapo one-handed variants. But if you, for example, ended up getting a cursed bow on them, they could be pretty okay with how far their stats went up. But okay, they still got shields. They got access to the light class of shields. They got access to a lot of armors. But the fact that their stats could get to the point where they were doing obscene damage was a little bit much. So on top of the fact that they could get their stats all the way up there, like I mentioned earlier, they get access to Steel Stance, which basically halves all physical damage until next turn. You got Evanescence, which is a kind of AoE self-exploding ability in case you need to make them blow up for some reason. And then they had probably one of the more worthless skills I've ever seen, which was concentration. Unlike the utterly amazing variant that showed up in FFT and FFTA, the concentration in the PSP remake was just for ninjutsu abilities. So they had a casting ability in the background, you may have remembered it, as the one that random characters can use with a surprising amount of effectiveness, but you could never get to work. Basically, if you got their intelligence up, they could do some very amazing things with ninjutsu. It was kind of like a low-key version of the original summon abilities from the original Luct and from Knight of Lotus. But when it came to most generics using them, they usually weren't very good. If you had a unique character using them, they could potentially do a lot of damage. Unfortunately, they scaled down a lot of things about that ability, so you were either going and one-shotting somebody or you were doing 1 damage. There was not very often a spot in between, but such things will happen. Either way, very fast, very durable, very high damage. They were pretty ridiculously overpowered, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people knew it. Now then, we move on to One Vision. So, what's changed in One Vision? How have they been improved or unimproved, etc.? Well, they've been improved in terms of balance quite significantly. So they are entirely a dedicated trickster class at this point. So they no longer get access to shields. All of their armor is light. However, all of their equipment is set up in such a way that you can have them still get a pretty good amount of coverage in terms of their defenses and offenses, just based off the equipment they have there. So I'm actually going to start backwards on the list here. Just as far as equipment goes, here's a few little builds, just kind of for the sake of showing what you can do with their weapon loadouts. So first of all, as far as weapons are concerned, they get access to fists, daggers. They get access to one-handed katanas, which, bear in mind, have a two-handed variant on them in 3 cases. Those are all, I believe, Path of Exile references. They also get access to a few ranged weapons here, so sidearms. So you get all the bolas and throwing spears and blow darts and all of that. You get access to one-handed bows, one-handed crossbows, and there we go. They don't get access to the lobber. However, they were given an innate throwing ability. So if you remember the fact that they got a throwing dagger as their ranged ability in the original remake, well, that's been improved. So now that throwing dagger actually has a chance to do poison, and it also does a pretty okay amount of damage. So in many cases, it's actually worthwhile to not even bother giving them a ranged weapon, because they have a pretty solid ranged option just as they are. Now, you might be wondering, what is all this now? You know, what's going on with this character? Well, they've been given this dagger. Essentially, this is the magic variant of the standard dagger. So the mage daggers give you a resistance bonus as well as spell strike if you should need it for any reason. Personally, I just view the resistance bonus as the main thing to go for here. They were given a short bow. This is going to be their main weapon. Bear in mind, only your primary hand weapon is the one that gives you the respective side bonuses. So, for example, if I were to put the dagger over here, it would give me pretty much no resistance bonus. Now, moving on to the armor, I gave them a heavy variant of the basic vest armor. This gives them a bit more health, a bit more defense. They don't get the vitality bonus that heavy armors get, but this is pretty much going to be the heavier variant of what they can actually wear. Because what I wanted with this character is essentially to have them be really tanky in the back line, so that they'd be able to just take any incoming hits. So the dagger's there to pretty much blunt the force of magic coming towards them. This armor is there to help blunt the force of any arrows coming at them. Nomad gloves are there for the sake of boosting their attack and for the sake of boosting their crit rate. As you can see, there's a luck bonus on these. And then a seal of vigor to just kind of basically make them a bit more tanky against all things. So these guys are just meant as kind of like a back row plink type of situation. Now over here we have a different variant on that same type of build. These ones I wanted specializing in throwing abilities, and actually, I just noticed I have these a little bit backwards because the new bristles are actually supposed to be up here while the bola is down on the lower end. The reason for doing this, these guys are not meant for dual wielding. Dual wield builds are very, very good with these guys. However, I want to do something a little bit different with these guys. So there we go. Now, alright, there we are. I apologize, I shouldn't have had those backwards here. The main idea behind this build here is, as you can see, when it comes to the bristles here, they actually give them an avoidance bonus. When it comes to the sidearms, it gives them a pretty powerful ranged ability, but it does slow them down a fair bit. So these guys, due to the fact that they're using sidearms, are going to be they're not going to be moving nearly as far as anybody else. Basically, short bows are good for skirmisher type builds, wherein you can have them running around the sides and throwing out arrows and kind of plinking away. When it comes to sidearm builds, these are very similar to longbows in that you really want them to be staying in one area. Now, there's a couple of variants on sidearms. These ones just hobble, whereas the other ones can inflict slow. So, throw them up as you will. There's a pretty significant weight difference, or rather RT penalty difference between the two. So, it makes you slower, but you have the ability to get slow off from your hits. So, just use whichever one you feel is more fitting at the time. So what we're going to do here, actually we're going to go ahead and give all of these guys meteor bolas, just to get that slow effect going. As you can see, they're set up with a bit of a different armor build here. The idea being that they are going to be the ones that are not exactly in the front line, but what I like to call a second liner, wherein they're just behind the front line, and they're just there trying to get off as much damage and as much, just as much disruption as they can. So they get an evasion bonus from this fist weapon. Again, bear in mind they don't get access to shields, because shields are amazing in one vision. So they don't get access to shields, so they can use this to give them a little bit of a boost in evasion. They get this vest, which gives them a boost in evasion. They have the Crucible Sallet here, which, it's not exactly a salad, whatever. So we get this, and yes, this gives them an agility bonus, so this essentially boosts their ability to hit with the bola. Sidearms in general are a little bit less accurate in a lot of cases, so the salad essentially helps make them a little bit more accurate, and it gives them a little bit of a resistance bonus. While also keeping a pretty decent amount of defense. And then the Seal of Wards here is here for basically preventing them from getting maged as much. Due to their positioning in that fight, this will essentially put them in a way where they usually won't be targeted by crossbows and bows. Usually they're going to have the front line in front of them to protect them that way. So the idea is that they try to avoid bows and crossbows while hopefully mitigating their damage. They're hopefully out of range of the front line, and then they just have to worry about casters, so their setup is mostly built for the sake of resisting that. And then lastly over here, well, not lastly at all, we have a pretty okay dual wielding build. So with one vision, one variant of the katana here is the parrying version. As you can see here, you get a parry bonus. You also get a negative luck stat. And you might be thinking, why would you take a weapon that gives you a negative stat? Well, in this case, since you're dual wielding, if you ever get a crit with it, essentially it'll throw your enemy away and you will not hit with your secondary weapon. So this is essentially set up in a way that you end up hitting with this first one and just opening them up for a hit with the second one. So the daggers, in this instance, are there for, for the sake of a little bit extra damage. It's mostly for flavor in this case. Actually, the better option for these guys. Where was it here? I meant to give them binding daggers. So if you have a binding dagger, this will essentially give you I believe it's 15% chance to inflict bind, like the Mordred song over here. So this will essentially mean that you'll get a fair bit of damage from having the dual wield in the first place, and then you've got a chance to bind them in place as well. They've been given bracers for the sake of improving their attack power. They've been given basic mail vests, well, elemental mail vests, for the sake of boosting their avoidance, and then they've been given void rings, which is another item that's been added, another one of the craftables that's been added by One Vision, which essentially allows you to reduce your weight by 10, which helps to counter the fact that they're carrying 2 weapons. So right now their weight is if they had not even been carrying these at all. In fact, it almost gets rid of 3 of their pieces of equipment weight-wise. So this one's mostly for going around and spreading out damage, hopefully repositioning before they can end up getting hit. It's a pretty alright one. And over here we have the frontliner kind of a skill type build, as I like to call them. So we've got Phantom Cloak here for boosting their accuracy a fair bit, as well as boosting their avoidance. This is a alternate variant of the Mage Robes, which allow them to essentially just be a better sword fighter. This is like your sword fighter in a robe type setup, or Jedi type build, or whatever you want to call it. I've heard some people say Ronin build, I've heard some people say Jedi build. It's just your skilled traveling swordsman type setup. Nomad gloves to boost their luck, and then I've given all of these three the unique katanas. So these are the one-handed katanas used in 2 hands. And essentially, these will be some of the unique weapons. They're actually technically higher level than I usually allow on some of these, in the sake of the Goddess Unleashed. But these 2 are technically falling within the under level 30 range, so I'm finding it acceptable. But yeah, these 3 are a set. So yeah, all of them are for the sake of evading in the front line and doing a good bit of damage and doing some cool stuff in the background. So we'll go ahead and let the AI take over and do a little bit of a fight here, just to kind of see how they do and discuss the ninja a little bit more. So as you saw, everything about them essentially just screams trickster build. They still get access to their Arts of War abilities. I haven't given them to these AIs, it now occurs to me. Their Art of War abilities are about the same as before. They do still gain access to ninjutsu and all that sort of thing. That is more or less the same, albeit a little bit more powerful. They'll actually be doing legitimate damage in some cases. You won't really see that situation where they're going and dealing only 1 damage. You won't really see as much of that whole, I'm going to go put myself right in the open to scratch a guy for nothing type of situation out of the AI. So whenever you see, a ninja running up and doing the whole casting thing, odds are they're going to be a lot more useful about it. So we'll actually go ahead and back out of this fight so I can show you what I mean. Because unfortunately, I didn't cover that, and that might be a really good part to cover, So I'll go ahead and retreat out of this fight and come back for another round. As you see, I think finally I have the performance issues of the recording software figured out here. It was a little bit of a challenge, but I think I finally got it done. So alright, go down here. Let's see. Skill-wise, I believe they've all got Art of War, so yeah, we'll go ahead and Let's see. Go ahead and I believe these guys were probably the most likely to use it. So if we browse over to the Arts of War here, so they get all their summons. They get access to all elements, so if you want them to specialize in a particular element, they are still going to be training that up really quickly because essentially you're getting 3 casts of a particular ability out of it. But yeah, they get access to war dances and that sort of thing. Not all. Actually, come to think of it, no, they do not get access to war dances. I'm incorrect on that. So they still just get their casting abilities. They get their old buff abilities. Bear in mind that these are the only ones that still require a reagent of some description. So that was taken away from Draconic, that was taken away from Necromantic, basically because there was really no point. You would essentially have to just go back to a really specific store to buy more. It caused limitations on the class. Whereas these guys' stuff is reasonably and logically available at any store that you go to, since they're essentially just kind of using whatever for the sake of this stuff. Again, it's really just there for flavor. So, like, you need a kunai in order to be able to do Shadowbind, Escalade, which gives them Nimble. This will allow them to ignore elevation, so this is a really good one. That's a new one. You get Water Step here, which lets them walk on water. That was from before. You get Decoy, which gives Nullify like it always did. Bridle and Benumb, as well as Envenom, doing what they always did. So I'm just going to give those to that lady in particular. You know, just kind of let her use them as she will, mostly for the sake of saving time here. So they're pretty good as far as being a background caster of sorts, roughly equivalent to how they used to be in March of the Black Queen, since they'll be able to run forward and, you know, get a few casts off, maybe get some pretty decent damage out of it. Recently, I've been playing my file on another run here. And for example, let's see, there was a Berserker versus a Ninja, and they were able to pretty effectively find that Berserker and go in repeatedly, hit them for, I believe, 50 damage per hit. And obviously that guy didn't survive so good, but this was pretty early in the game, so they can do pretty darn decent damage. I should mention that this was actually a boss character that they were fighting, a boss ninja. One of the early bosses in the Chaos route, actually. But yes, they can do really good damage with it. Uh, all of their abilities like Shadowbind and all that still very useful. Their accuracy is actually a fair bit higher, as you might be able to tell here. In some cases, the AI will actually go choose to attack with a knife instead of a bow. I'm not entirely sure why they do that, but allows a little bit more talking to happen. There we go. That looks like one of the one-handed two-handers. But yeah, they get access to a good amount of weapons. So, like I mentioned earlier, everything about setting up a build for a ninja is now about trying to kind of envision their situation, as it were. They still get a lot of movement, and I forgot to actually go over their abilities. Now that I think about it, dang it, me, what are you doing? So they've gotten a bunch of really cool abilities now. So if we go down to the skills here, that's not the guy I want to go over the skills for. If we go down to their skills, we get Tyrannico, which is a short-range sleep bomb. Essentially, this is an action ability that allows them to pick one of the targets close to them and have a 60% chance to put them to sleep. So that's potentially very useful for shutting down a front line. We got Mind's Eye over here, which lets them evade all melee attacks until next turn. You may recognize this as it used to be a Swordmaster ability. So the Swordmaster has instead been given Steel Stance, and their Mind's Eye has been given to ninjas because they fit a lot better. Ninjas, you know, they're supposed to stereotypically be the super evasive guy, and, you know, this allows them to evade all melee attacks, while Swordmasters, you know, they're supposed to be the one that's always blocking everything with their sword and be all that whole Jedi type setup. So, you know, they should be the ones that are able to withstand a bunch of hits, even though that's not exactly how that worked, but whatever. Doesn't matter, that's a side point. So, yeah, that's really good. I'm trying to find one of the abilities here, which I didn't put on everyone because I wasn't sure how the AI would handle it. But this right here, this is going to be their bread and butter for mid-game. I've seen a few people actually ask, you know, with how many nerfs the ninjas have gotten in terms of defense and resistance and all that, how on earth are they supposed to get to particular areas? This ability right here, you may notice, again, it comes in around mid-game, so around level 25 now. So up to that point, they're usually able to use their pretty high movement range. As you can see, they get a movement of 6 as opposed to the usual 4 or 5. So they've got pretty high movement range, especially if you give them the scout set. They're able to get that up to 7. So at that point, they're already matching their Knight of Lotus counterpart. So basically, they will usually have enough movement to be able to get behind cover to some description. You usually want them skirting around the back of the map, and then what you usually want to do is have maybe one or two of them go after whatever healers or casters are causing you problems in the back line. You have them, like, let's say there's a healer that healed and retreated, right? That's something the AI loves to do. So what you do is you'd have a ninja with 2 binding daggers, for example. So the standard dagger variant. I like to call them binding daggers, but they're basically there for hamstringing opponents. So you have them go in with 2 daggers, go in, like, let's say you give them benumb, and you give them that. So essentially, they will best case scenario, well, they will guaranteed get a stun once they sneak up on that guy. Their accuracy is pretty good, so they'll usually be able to hit without any problems. So you have them, get a stun. Then there's a chance that they'll be bound in that spot, meaning that suddenly that healer is A, possibly the only one that can actually go and get rid of their own stun, and B, has a 50% chance to even fail at that, and C, has a guy right at their back that probably will be moving again pretty quickly, and D, potentially they might be bound to that spot, causing them, 2 or more turns of delay, by which point your front line can potentially break through. So they're there as kind of a coordinated, shutdown from the back unit. If you use them right, they can be amazing, but yeah, they are very fragile now. Fragile and agile, as it were. So Wild Hunt takes this up to 11. This is an action ability that allows them to suddenly double their movement range. So even though this will cause them a pretty significant delay in terms of taking their next turn, it is ridiculously good. So that allows them to just clear the entire map. Well, not the entire map, but usually a good portion of it. Half to 2/3, depending on the size of the map. It's very powerful. On top of that, they get naturally high evasion, so if you give them evasive things, like for example a dual fist build is usually pretty good. If you give them leggings, a vest, a fist, and a seal of evasion, they're usually going to be doing a fantastic job of keeping themselves going. Their damage is still pretty well up there. Again, you've got your alternate variants of the different swords, so you may notice there will occasionally be a little bit of an extra little small number that shows up. So katanas have another little hidden bonus that allows them to cut into RT for the standard variants. So, well, not RT, I should say TP. So this allows them to shut down kill moves that you're afraid of. This allows them to shut down TP moves that you're afraid of. Obviously, you wouldn't really want to be using a team of ninjas to fight in the front line like this. This is just for the sake of just having them showing off abilities that they can do in the most dangerous possible manner, because the AI doesn't know what they're doing. But anyhow, uh, pretty fantastic support unit. If you end up giving them a bow or a sidearm, they can be a really good kind of skirmisher type setup. Personally, I prefer rogues for skirmishers, but these guys can be very good for that as well. You can think of them as kind of a potentially multi-role skirmisher, since with rogues, typically what you do is give them like a light shield and a light bow, and you'd have them skirting around just out of range, just plinking away, doing their sort of thing, probably using Speed Star to speed themselves up. In the case of the ninja, they're going to be a little bit slower when compared to a Speed Starred rogue. However, their general speed is going to be pretty comparable. They're still going to be doing a bit more damage. On top of that, they get access to, well, they're just going to be better with their melee weapons. So, for example, if you go for a katana and bow build, that's also pretty good. You could have them be a little bit closer. Say there's an enemy that's trying to approach them. Say you want to shut down their TP generation. So you would have them, let's say, you would have them set up with counter hit. You would have them set up with that katana there, and then what you do is just keep plinking them with the bow until they got close, run up and hit with a sword, go ahead and turn on your evasion ability. They will miss, you will end up hitting them back, taking off some of their TP. It's potentially really good. You just got to be careful with them. Usually, you want to make sure that they're never in a more than one-on-one situation. Personally, I find that they work best either solo or in teams of two. As typically, I like to use rogues in teams of two as well, sometimes up to three. But for ninjas, I like to use them in teams of one or two. And all right, I think that about covers it. If there's, well, let's see. I mean, they're usually going to be good at covering a lot of things as far as their casting abilities. I probably should mention that as well. But oh, should mention that as well. They have, even though they don't have access to a lot of healing options, they only have Field Alchemy 1 and no ability to throw items. They do still have access to reflect damage. So if you support them with healers, they can potentially be a pretty good damage sponge and damage reflector as well, if that's the type of setup that you want to go for. But all right, I think I've about covered what I wanted to cover here. As you can see, they're doing a pretty okay job just handling this, even being run by the AI. They've got a bunch of units locked down. They've got a few down. They're definitely well, that was a lucky 25%. But they're definitely giving better than they're taking right now, and this is even without employing any of the strategies mentioned earlier. So, all right, hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully this was informative, and yeah, have a good day. Take care.